Headphone warning. If you're listening to this video using headphones, you may want to adjust the volume to about halfway because I'm finna get loud. Ryan Condal has just done an interview with Beyond the Trailer, which is a channel that makes very similar content that I do here on YouTube, but they cover a wide variety of subjects. She gave an interview to Ryan Condal and his podcast partner in this video. I want to discuss 3 different things that I think were confirmed after having listened to that video. Now, I will not be playing any audio or video clips, but I will be showing pictures of that interview during this video. I've linked that video down below in the description, so go ahead and go watch that before you watch this one, and let's... First things first, before we get started, please do me a massive favor, massive solid, and slap a like on this video. The like goal is going to be 420, was Khalifa laugh. Also, make sure you're subscribed, and this is the most important part. Make sure you have your notifications turned on after you've subscribed, so that way you'll get an alert in what's known around here, and the only reason why I'm addressing this is because 65% of my watch time this month has been from people who have yet to subscribe, so please go ahead and do so. But once you have your notifications turned on, you get an alert every single time I drop a video throughout this long night. Now, one of the first things Ryan Condal confirms in this interview, and it's not necessarily leaked material, but don't worry, we'll discuss that in a second, is that Ryan Condal is a giant nerd. And I did some research in all of my videos where I talk about Ryan. I mention how he's a lot more of a fanboy than Dan and Dave. People's biggest issue with Game of Thrones is that it seems as though Dan and Dave, in the last couple seasons at least, or most could argue post-season 5, that's not necessarily my opinion, but I do think that Season 8 and a bit of Season 7 was rushed, although I enjoyed Season 7 a lot more than Season 8. All I'm saying is that Ryan Condal is way more of a George R. Martin and A Song of Ice and Fire fanboy in general than Dan and Dave. He mentions in this interview that after college, right as he graduated college, Lord of the Rings had been coming out in the movie theaters and he was craving fantasy, and then he found a Game of Thrones. This was 20 years ago. So for 20 years, Ryan Condal has been studying George R. Martin's work, and it just so happened that sometime around 2013 or 2014, according to his interview in Ryan Condal, he reached out to George R. Martin. Ryan had his agent reach out to George's agent and asked if he was interested in catching lunch because Ryan had happened to be in Santa Fe. Ever since then, they've had this relationship where basically I'm pretty sure it's something like 2 nerdy fanboys, how like I am with some of my friends, and just reminiscing about shit they enjoy in sci-fi and fantasy. Now, obviously, Ryan Condal, the last thing he wants to do is disrespect Game of Thrones. He also mentions in an interview that he realizes that the boots and the shoes that he's trying to fill, or that he's going to fill in producing and show running this new show, are massive. He's not going to disrespect Dan and Dave. He seems as though he treats their work. He knows that Dan and Dave, for the early part of Game of Thrones, gave it pretty much all they got. They were clearly avid book readers, at least for certain scenes. Some scenes they left out makes you question why, but none of us are really writers, so we can't really speak about that. And if you are a writer, watching this video, well, then let me know down below in the comment section. But all I'm saying is that obviously we're going to disagree with their choices in writing, but a good thing about Ryan Condal is that not only is he a massive fanboy of George R. Martin and Song of Ice and Fire in general, but he's not going to disrespect some of the things that Game of Thrones had previously established and what made that series so great. And let's face it, I would have never heard of Game of Thrones or A Song of Ice and Fire if it wasn't for the television series. And although there are many fantasy book readers that discovered this series, like Ryan Condal, 20 plus, and even all the way back in the 90s, almost 30 years ago, I'm not one of those people. There's a vast majority of the audience that is now book readers that discovered this through the show. I'm one of those people. So we can thank the show for introducing the books to a massive audience. Ryan Condal respects that. One of the things he's going to keep on going is what I sort of mentioned in one of my previous leaked videos, is that Michelle Clapton and Nina Gold were going to be brought on from Game of Thrones. Ryan mentions in the interview that his showrunning partner, Miguel Sapochnik, has a motto of, if it ain't broken, don't fucking fix it. Basically, everything that worked for Game of Thrones is going to be brought into this series. Now, he's questioned by the person who hosts Beyond the Trailer, if we're going to see a prop, or if we see a prop rather, would it be easily recognizable and be like, oh, that's from House of the Dragon? And to this, Ryan Condal says, well, yes, they're going to be keeping with the tradition, so I wouldn't be surprised if they hired the prop master from Game of Thrones, or armorer rather, basically the guys who is responsible for making all of the super fashionable armor, not Michelle Clapton, who makes the wardrobe for the Game of Thrones actors. But this armorer, Tommy Dune, I'm pretty sure will likely be brought on as well, because he was responsible for Jaime's Season 1 armor, which in my opinion is pretty iconic and what drew a lot of people into this series. So if Tommy Dune is brought on, that same armor style can still be kept with. And Ryan actually mentions in the interview that this is a different time period set. He doesn't give a specific time period, but with King Viserys being confirmed and us being, knowing that it's Dance of the Dragons since it was confirmed by EW, which is HBO's official source for anything Game of Thrones or this new series, House of the Dragon. With that being confirmed so long ago, we know that this is going to be taking place in 129 or 130 AC, which is where the Dance of the Dragons is in the height of it. Jon Snow was born in 283 AC, or roundabouts there. That's almost 150 years after the events of this new Game of Thrones prequel series. Now, the main series takes place around, I believe, 300 AC. But with House of the Dragon taking place during an entirely different time period that's over 100 years before the events of the main series, well, Westeros was in its prime, mainly because the family who helped establish Westeros, and most of the Seven Kingdoms being united, that being House Targaryen, were still in the height of their power. This is actually the war that took out the Targaryens' dragons, and this is what left them ultimately weakness. And then internal feuding, very similar to this war. It was about a war line of succession known as the Blackfyre Rebellions. There were many different ones, but after their dragons were wiped out, this is what led to the downfall of House Targaryen, and what ultimately led to when Robert had his rebellion, House Targaryen being expelled from the land and Daenerys being sent far, far away across the Narrow Sea and into Essos. Well, since this new series will take place at a time where House Targaryen still had a lot of its power, influence, and money, everyone's armor and everyone's costume and everything itself in general will be lavish. And one of the things that I personally most look forward to myself is the fact that a lot of super famous Targaryen locations are going to be rebuilt. For instance, I've heard through the DMs over on Twitter, again, make sure you go follow me at Sir_Hunts, but I've heard that we're going to see during the first episode a 15-minute scene that shows basically the entire dragon pit in its glory, fully reconstructed. Now, one thing that should be noted is that during the dragon pit's height, or during the Targaryens' height of splendor, most of their dragons were held in the dragon pit. And just sort of skimming over what happens, because I literally referenced that in my last video, but a super tragic events in the dragon pit ends up involving and killing some of the younger and more experienced dragons that were held in the dragon pit at the time. It involves like civilians turning on the Targaryens in power and basically ransacking everything. One of the dragons freaks out and destroys the entire dragon pit, and this is where we see it in ruins in Game of Thrones Season 7 and in Season 8. You all let me know if you're excited as I am down below in the comment section about seeing this fully reconstructed dragon pit, although it will be extremely tragic to watch that many dragons dying on screen at one time when it was so easily preventable. Since we're getting near the end of this video, I want to mention some of the two things that I think were confirmed, and then I'll mention the last thing. It sort of ties it all together. Now, the first thing is that Nina Gold is brought on as the casting director, and so is Michelle Clapton. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'm sure Miguel Sapochnik, and they have a working relationship with HBO, so I'm pretty sure they got the job, and will not only be bringing us an epic cast, but also amazing looking costume and set design. And as we all know, set design and costumes are one of the things that sucked us into Game of Thrones and made us sort of forget about the real world and think that this story was actually happening. Now, obviously, it's on TV and we know it's fake, but when you have a costume that looks so well made and it's up close on camera, it makes the world seem that much more immersive. And the second thing that I think was confirmed from my leaks is the fact that the show is a lot further along than we've all been getting information or casting announcements about, which I'm pretty sure we're going to be hearing some in the next few weeks. I'm pretty sure by Christmas we'll have at least 3 of the main leads announced. But in that interview with Beyond the Trailer, Ryan Condal, when he's first asked about any spoilers he could mention for House of the Dragon, he said, well, there's a ton of things that I could say, but any one of those things could get me shot or killed. And obviously he was joking, but he knows that House of the Dragon spoilers are on super lockdown. So that means that anything that they've been working on, which he's living in London now and likely going to the Leavesden studio daily, since the show is a lot further along than we're being told, and only having one casting member being confirmed, and that they haven't actually started filming stuff or at least building the sets and have most of the cast confirmed, I think my leaks have some bit of validity to them, even though I recommend that you take them with a grain of salt, because they could be bullshit but do their purpose and serve us in entertaining us throughout this long night. Now, the last thing that I want to mention that I think further cements that is is that during the interview with Beyond the Trailer, Ryan Condal mentions that one of the things that's important to him as being a prop collector of sorts is that he wants the props from Game of Thrones, specifically weapons or ancient swords and things that don't exist in the main storyline that we saw in Game of Thrones and do exist in House of the Dragon, like the armor, are going to exist during this show. Now, there's a scene that I've mentioned a few times throughout my mini House of the Dragon videos. Speaking of which, I've actually linked a playlist down below in the description. If you want, you can go and watch that and binge all those videos. But my source states that episode 2 of House of the Dragon will start out with loud drumming being heard throughout the fully reconstructed dragon pit. The lead-up shots to this scene are some of the background scenery we saw in the mini seasons of Game of Thrones where Tyrion escorted Jon to the dragon pit to meet with Cersei, but supposedly there are going to be 500 extras that are all wearing House Targaryen bannerment, whatever that is, which I'm assuming that's basically costumes. The opening scene lasts for about 10 minutes and multiple shots feature the main events of the tourney. The crowd is shown to be having the, quote, time of their lives, and at this time, the kingdom is the most prosperous it's ever been, thanks to Jaehaerys handing down the reins to Viserys, who we've had confirmed as Paddy Considine. He was known to be a bit of a partier, so this scene will mainly show how extremely extravagant the parties Viserys threw were. But the tourney ends with Daemon flying in on Caraxes, who is a massive red dragon. Before the dragon lands, Daemon leaps from the dragon and lands at his brother's feet. The crowd erupts into a frenzy of cheers and laughter. Prince Daemon then removes his crown and kneels, announcing that he has conquered the Stepstones in honor of his brother, the king. Viserys stands and declares that the Seven Kingdoms has never known a greater knight. Daemon then walks over to his niece Rhaenyra and kneels at her feet, offering her the sword Dark Sister and his crown of the Stepstones, and stating that if his brother was offered any more weight, he would perhaps fall over, because the weight of the Seven Kingdoms had clearly bogged him down, and so has his weight. Now, I'm pretty sure if that scene actually does happen, the joke that Daemon makes will likely be a lot more silver-tongued, as Daemon is meant to be just as witty as he is fierce as a knight. Getting back on track here and wrapping this video up, Ryan Condal mentions in that interview with Beyond the Trailer that one of the things that he cares about the most, aside from collecting props, is the fact that real-looking props, that part of the reason what made Game of Thrones so great is the realistic-looking armor, set design, and props. And he mentions swords on a particular note. He says, like, he cares on the minuscule level that when you pick something up, it feels and looks real. And he knows that when you see that on screen, it's very important that things are made with care and handmade and look genuine. And the fact that he mentions swords and, you know, we have this King Viserys being known as sort of the partier king, and how the tournament or celebrating the 5-year anniversary of Queen Alicent and King Viserys Targaryen, this is where the greens and the blacks is established, and Prince Daemon does show up at this ceremony. And then we have House of the Dragon, the first interview of one of the showrunners of House of the Dragon, Ryan Condal, specifically mentioning swords. I think that confirms that this scene with Daemon, Prince Daemon, handing Blackfyre and his crown of the Stepstones over to Rhaenyra, or at least kneeling at his brother's feet, is something that may legitimately happen in this new series. But alright, I want to thank you all so much for watching. If you could please slap a like on this video, as the like goal is going to be 420. Also, make sure you're subscribed, and this is the most important part. Make sure you have your notifications turned on, so that way you'll get an alert every single time I drop a Game of Thrones video, or a House of the Dragon video, or a Lord of the Rings, or one of the many other subjects I cover on this channel throughout this long night. Super special shout out to every single member you see listed right here of my Patreon family over on patreon.com/SirHuntsReviews. I want to thank you all so much for watching. My name's Mark, and this has been Sir Hunts Reviews.